In this video, let's dig into gradients and blend modes in Affinity to create colorful vignettes and store them as assets, allowing us to easily reuse them on any photo and quickly modify it after reusing it. Let's go. We are going to start by adding a rectangle covering the canvas of the document. While the rectangle is selected, we are going to select the gradient tool and switch to the fill type radial. This will add a gradient from the center to the side in a circular form. This will be the base for our vignette. I'll move the endpoint to the bottom left so that the darkest areas of the vignette will be the corners. Next thing we need to do is to change the colors of the gradient. The center point will need to be mid-gray, which has a luminance value of 50 in the color wheel, and the ending point should be a very dark gray close to black. Perfect. Our base is ready. Now it's time to add some colors. I will use red and blue for this example. I'm going to add a fill layer and set its color to red. I want red to only apply to the top area in the vignette. To achieve that, we can mask it, or in this case, an easy way is to apply a clipping mask. For the clipping mask, I will use a rectangle, add a linear gradient to it, with the top color having full opacity and the bottom zero opacity. When we drop this on the icon of the red fill layer below, it will now act as a clipping mask, with as a result that the red fill layer will now slowly be masked out from the top to the bottom. I also don't want this fill layer to affect the mid-gray of the gradient below. For this, I will open up the blend options and change the blend range of the underlaying layer, so that it only gets blended for values until the midtones. By the way, as a side note, we can make the effect of the red tone stronger if you move the left point closer to the midpoint. Now that we got our first color set up, we can just duplicate this layer and rotate the clipping mask with 180 degrees, so that the color is now applied from the bottom up. When I change the color of this fill to blue, we can see the final colored gradient, which we will use in a minute as our vignette. Before applying this as a vignette, I also want a copy of the base gradient we created earlier. For this, I will use the duplicate linked function, which will make sure the gradient changes will be in sync with each other. I'm going to move this linked copy to the top of the layer stack and put it inside a group. This will allow me to disable the gradient without disabling the lower gradient. I could have also unlinked the visibility, but sometimes I'm just too lazy for that. Now, let's select all the layers we created and group them. Before applying this group as a vignette, let's finalize the group by setting the blend modes of the fill layers to overlay. This will darken the colors and act more like a vignette. And secondly, let's set the blend mode of the top group with the gradient to soft light. This will even darken things more if needed. For now, I'm going to keep it turned off. Remember we used mid-gray for the center of our base gradient? The reason for this is that the mid-gray has no effect in overlay blend mode. So if we apply this group in the overlay blend mode, we see our colored vignette in full action. Pretty awesome. I can open up the group and enable the top group, which will darken the gradient as we've seen earlier, which gives a more darker effect. We can also adjust the strength of the vignette by modifying the midpoint in the base gradient. This setup has a lot of creative options besides being a vignette. For example, I can change the blend mode of the fill layers to normal, and then it becomes more of a light leak. Another advantage of this setup is that it can be saved as an asset, so you can easily reuse this. Make sure the Assets panel is enabled in the window menu. And with the Move tool selected, I can drag and drop the group to the Assets panel. The whole group we just created is now saved as an asset. I can quickly create a new document and drag and drop the asset to the canvas of the new document. I just need to make sure I adjust the size of it, and there we have the same effect added in a very easy way. As mentioned, this group can be used in various ways. Just experiment with various blend modes and blend ranges. For example, setting the fill layers to the contrast negate blend mode also does get interesting results. If you're looking for a more stronger vignette effect, an option could be to set the blend mode of the top group to linear light. To control its strength, you can lower the fill percentage of this group through the blend options. By the way, another option to create a very similar effect is by using rectangles instead of fill layers in the group. Let me drag and drop a version I created earlier from the assets. I'm using this more for a creative use instead of a vignette, but when we open up the group, notice that instead of two fill layers with clipping masks, I have used a rectangle with a gradient from the main color to transparent color. The only disadvantage of this method is that you need to make sure that the gradient tool is selected when making color changes. In this example, these two color gradients are also used in the color blend mode. So the position of these rectangles in the layer stack has an effect to the final gradient color. An advantage of using rectangles instead of fill layers is that you can have a different ending color, which goes to transparency, creating interesting color combinations as you can see. Also, as a final tip, you can move the gradient center, which can allow you to adjust the effect so that your subject gets more attention. So here I have an interesting version of the group. As mentioned, I can just make an asset out of it, and if I ever need it in a new document, I can just drag it from the assets. For this example, I will change the blend mode of the top group to linear light and adjust the gradient to fit more with the composition. That looks pretty cool. Thanks again for tuning in. If you liked this video or found it inspiring, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Be cool, and until the next video.